Welcome to the Explainer. All right, let's jump right in. We're living in this wild era right now where artificial intelligence can write code, draft legal briefs, and, seemingly reason through these incredibly complex problems. But what if I told you that beneath this whole impressive facade, the absolute most advanced AI models in the world completely fall apart when they're faced with a simple psychology test from 1935? Crazy, right? Today, we're investigating a really fascinating mystery that goes right to the core of how AI actually works, and honestly, more importantly, what it's quietly doing to our own human brains.
So here is the big question. Are AI assistants quietly erasing your ability to think independently? Now, I know, it sounds a little bit like a sci-fi movie plot, but peer-reviewed research from top universities is telling us this is a very real, very measurable phenomenon. We're going to look at the hard data, the brain scans, and the actual mechanical limits of artificial intelligence to answer this for sure. Let's get right into the evidence and see exactly what's happening. Section 1. AI fails a classic test.
Okay, so this elegantly simple puzzle is called the Stroop test. It was invented by psychologist John Ridley Stroop way back in 1935. Here's how it works. You're asked to name the color of the ink, not read the actual word. When the word red is printed in red ink, boom, it's super easy. But when you get an incongruent setup, like the word blue printed in red ink, try naming just the ink color quickly. It creates some genuine friction, doesn't it? And that's simply because reading is just so incredibly automatic for us. To succeed here, the human brain has to use something called executive control to actively suppress that urge to read the word, keeping us totally locked in on the goal of naming the color. Most healthy human adults can rip through long lists of these with really high accuracy. But what about AI?
Well, the data here is just absolutely staggering. In June 2026, researchers tested top AI models on this exact task. On a short, quick list of just 5 conflicting words, GPT-4o basically nailed it, 91% accuracy. But watch what happens as the list grows. At 10 words, the accuracy plummets down to 57%. And then, under the sustained pressure of a 40-word list, the world's most advanced AI literally collapses to just 15% accuracy. 15%!
And no, this wasn't just one model having a bad day. Claude 3.5 Sonnet held on a little bit longer, sure, but eventually it suffered a sharp decline to just 24% accuracy on those exact same 40-word lists. Honestly, every leading model, we're talking GPT-5, Gemini 2.5, they all show this exact same underlying signature of failure. They were great at short sprints, but they just completely collapsed when the task demanded sustained, conflict-resistant focus.
Moving on to section 2, how AI actually pays attention.
So why does this happen? Well, there's a really fundamental difference between human and machine minds here. On the biological side, we have executive control. Our brains actively maintain a goal in our working memory while simultaneously and continuously monitoring for and suppressing competing distractions. It's essentially a form of internal governance over our own cognitive process. Now, on the AI side, we have transformer self-attention. This is really just a mathematical mechanism that weighs tokens to predict the next word. It is fantastic, truly, for tracking context across a huge document, but it completely lacks any internal governing mechanism to sustain a goal over time when it's being actively distracted. So, here is the absolutely crucial point. Under sustained pressure, the AI increasingly defaults to reading the word, not naming the color. It just reverts to the response that its training made most automatic. It literally lacks the executive control required to consistently suppress that temptation. Think about that for a second. An AI model can write a textbook-perfect, flawless paragraph explaining exactly what the Stroop effect is, but it cannot actually exercise the executive control to beat the test itself under escalating pressure. There's just no way around it. Which brings us to section 3. The cognitive debt crisis. To really grasp the stakes here, we need to look at this definition of cognitive debt. It's the degradation of our independent thinking that occurs when we outsource cognitive friction to machines. I want you to think of this exactly like technical debt in software, or even financial debt. It accumulates gradually, and it's almost totally invisible. Look, offloading a meeting date to your calendar app, totally fine. But when we start outsourcing the actual reasoning, the analysis, the generation of core ideas to an AI, we start racking up massive cognitive debt. We're bypassing the very friction that builds our brains in the first place. And we actually have some pretty chilling physical evidence for this now. A 2025 MIT Media Lab study strapped EEG headsets onto students while they were writing essays. For the students who relied heavily on AI, the brain scans showed, and I quote, reduced activation in brain regions associated with working memory, creativity, and executive function. Their brains were literally, measurably less active. And when they were tested later on, they remembered less and had a way weaker understanding of the material than the students who wrote independently.
Let's walk through exactly how this kind of insidious atrophy happens, step by step. Step 1, AI handles the generative phase. You know, that hard, heavy lifting of staring at a blank page and trying to organize your thoughts. Step 2, human editing essentially replaces human origination. And here's the thing, editing is a lower-level cognitive task. The people who improve the most at writing are the ones who repeatedly write first drafts, not just the ones who casually tweak them. Finally, step 3, critical judgment and metacognition degrade. Metacognition is basically your ability to evaluate your own reasoning. When AI completely removes that productive struggle, you lose the ability to regulate your own learning. Just like physical muscles at the gym, skills that go unpracticed are absolutely going to weaken.
Section 4. The GPS of the mind. Now, you might be wondering, have we seen anything like this before? We actually have. We've seen this exact kind of cognitive atrophy. Years ago, researchers studied London taxi drivers who had to navigate those incredibly complicated city streets entirely without GPS. Their brains actually showed an enlarged hippocampus. That's the area responsible for spatial memory. But when people in general started relying heavily on GPS, studies suddenly showed reduced hippocampus activation. The GPS was reliably handling the cognitive function, so the brain's own mapping capacity just began to shrink. It directly, and I mean directly, mirrors what is happening right now. By outsourcing our reasoning to AI, we're basically turning it into a GPS for the mind, which directly threatens our own executive function.
So how do you know if you're personally accumulating this cognitive debt? Well, here are a few warning signs to look out for. Are you struggling to start tasks without firing up an AI first? Are you noticing a worsening memory for information you just read? Or perhaps, are you finding yourself blindly trusting AI-generated outputs? That last point is huge. It was highlighted by some fascinating research from Microsoft and Carnegie Mellon. They found that even highly experienced knowledge workers fall victim to what they call automation bias. Basically, over time, as reviewing AI output starts to feel so much easier than doing the independent analysis, our brains just learn that the AI is, good enough. So we simply stop critically evaluating it. We just let the hallucinations and the errors slip right on through.
Section 5. Designing friction for thinking. The absolutely crucial point here is this concept called desirable difficulties. In educational psychology, this basically means that struggle and friction actually produce much better long-term retention. Now, we've been completely trained by tech companies to view friction as a bug, right? Something that needs to be smoothed over for our ultimate convenience. But biologically speaking, cognitive friction is an absolute necessity for human learning. If something is just too easy, your brain literally doesn't bother to build the neural pathways. It just doesn't.
And this is exactly why the design of the AI tools we use matters so enormously. Just look at how the really effective AI tools like AI Ready School's Psycher are being designed today. Instead of just handing you a finished, convenient answer on a silver platter, they surface follow-up questions. They actually require the user to justify their steps before moving on to the next one. They actively preserve that productive struggle we just talked about. These tools are purposefully designed to act as cognitive sparring partners that actually provoke your reasoning, rather than acting like digital oracles that just bypass your brain entirely.
All right, let's bring this all together. True AI literacy is understanding on a fundamental level that AI systems simply do not reason the way human brains do. It's not just about learning how to write a clever prompt. It's about understanding that while AI is incredibly good at recognizing patterns, it completely lacks the executive control for sustained, complex, conflict-heavy logic. Because of that, human judgment has to be actively maintained in those exact situations where AI is the least dependable. I want to wrap up this explainer with one final, pretty provocative thought to leave you with. Is your AI tool making your life easier, or is it just making your brain weaker? As we continue to integrate these incredibly powerful systems into our schools, our offices, and our daily routines, it's a question we absolutely all need to evaluate for ourselves. Because at the end of the day, the measure of a truly great tool isn't just how smartly it sounds like it's thinking, it's whether it leaves you a better thinker than it found you. Thank you so much for joining me today. And hey, I highly encourage you to keep questioning, keep struggling, and most importantly, keep thinking for yourself.